Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Colthard, and I'm a consultant for the Marshfield Clinic Health System and Wisconsin After School Network. I will be moderating today's webinar with Dr. Sally Scoville. We are pleased to be offering this learning series with the Marshfield Clinic Healthcare System and the Wisconsin Department of Administration. Today is the third session of a four-part series on behavior interventions. This series was developed following a response to a needs assessment conducted by the Wisconsin After School Network this past fall. I'll give you a little more background on Dr. Scoville in a moment. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Please keep your microphones on mute. If you have questions, we ask you to post those in the chat box, which the Marshfield Clinic staff will be monitoring. We will be fielding questions at the end of this presentation, but do not hesitate to put questions in the chat box so we can get to them after. As a reminder, this presentation is being recorded and will be sent to all registered participants in the next week. Dr. Sally Scoville is a professor in the School of Health Science and Wellness, College of Professional Studies, University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Sally also oversees the Employee Wellness Program at UW-Stevens Point, which was awarded a bronze level award from the Governor's Worksite Wellness Program. Her field of study includes worksite health promotion programs and designing effective interventions for community and corporate clients. She has published articles about developing experiential learning programs for students. Sally is also a faculty for the National Wellness Institute's 2 certificate programs in worksite wellness and is a board member for the Wellness Council of Wisconsin. Sally has been working in the field of wellness for 31 years in a variety of roles prior to coming to UW-Stevens Point. She is Yoga Alliance certified instructor, completed training in resilience from the Organization Wellness and Learning Systems, studied mindfulness through the Penn Resilience Program, and utilizes the VIA character strengths to assist students to grow more resilient using their unique character strengths. Dr. Scoville, I now turn this presentation over to you.
Well, good morning to everyone. I like these bios because they make you sound so important. Because we always think about what's all the good stuff I can put in there. But what I really like is just working with people and groups one-on-one to help us be better. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today, is about, one, I listened to some of the presentations. We've talked a lot about how we help others and how you work with others, and I know next week is about trauma-informed care. But we don't often sit back and think about, if we don't take care of ourselves, then we can't take care of others as well. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I am going to share my screen and share the presentation. What I also want to tell you is that I like to be very interactive. So this is going to be some talk, but I really want you guys to get very engaged in the presentation. So I'll be asking you to do some activities. We may go into breakout rooms. I might be asking you to share in the chat, or even to please unmute yourself and contribute when we start talking about these dimensions of wellness, because this is really all about taking care of ourselves and how we see these dimensions of wellness playing out in our lives. So if you can see here this graphic, just a little background on the left-hand side of the first slide, the 7 dimensions of wellness. To give you some background, in 1978, the National Wellness Institute and instructors and physician and some PhDs from University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point all came together and created this idea of wellness and the dimensions of wellness. And then UW-Stevens Point actually added a 7th dimension. NWI recognizes 6, we do the 7th. But we've been promoting this dimensions of wellness idea since the late 70s and into the 80s. So our programming that we've always taught students, which is why I moved up here 15 years ago, is based on how do we bring these dimensions of wellness together in people's lives. We often think of physical wellness when we ask people about wellness, but we don't always think about the other areas of the seven dimensions. So we're going to talk about those today and then give you an opportunity to get a little bit more interactive and how you might incorporate those into your life. So are you guys ready to go for the day? Hopefully, it's hard to generate enthusiasm sometimes on WebEx and Zooms, but thumbs up and anything. Oh, I love that. Thank you, Kelly. Woohoo. So let's just talk about first, what is self-care and why do we need to do this? Well, self-care is really about protecting your own well-being and happiness. It's not being selfish. It's about taking care of ourselves because, again, we don't take care of others as well when we're not feeling as well. And I'm sure all of you could give me plenty of examples of that. Self-care can be as simple as brushing your teeth and eating healthy. Do you take time to recharge? I don't know about you, but sometimes that's one of my hardest ones is saying, I need to be doing something. But sometimes it's just okay to sit there and just do nothing. Get enough sleep, water. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. So taking that time to just recharge can help improve that relationship with others, the people we work with in our after-school networks, family members, even people that we might interact with just going to the grocery store. And so I want to know, are there some ways that you're already practicing self-care that you can name? And feel free to go on and just put those in the chat. And we'll take a look at some of those. Are there some ways you're doing it? Extra sleep? Yes, absolutely. Daily walks? It's one of my favorites. Walking the dogs. Daily walks and walking the dogs. It helps us get us out there. Journaling. Ooh, good coffee. Reading. Well, you guys have already been posting stuff in there about self-care. We could skip the rest of the presentation. You got it. Absolutely. Snuggling. Yes, we saw Kelly's cat come up earlier, who's going to be 1 year old tomorrow. Many of us have our kids and our cats and our dogs that might end up in our Zoom WebEx meetings now, don't we? And I love seeing those. Great. You guys know how to do this. So just briefly, let's talk about what is wellness. So wellness is really that conscious, self-directed, evolving process of achieving full potential. We don't ever necessarily get to full potential, but we try to reach that. And we can be ill and not in as good a health, but still be well if we're reaching our full potential within that state of disease, illness, or poor health. I'll just give you an example. Last year, I had surgery and treatment for breast cancer. But even in the middle of that, I still tried to maintain my stress levels as low as I could. I tried to keep as physically active as I possibly could. I tried to stay connected with friends and family as much as I could. So even while I was still going through that challenging time, I tried to keep my ultimate wellness in mind at all times. And I feel like I came through much better in the end than some people potentially could. So again, I just wanted to give you a personal example of that. We also look at it being multidimensional. So we're going to talk about what all those dimensions are. We're going to go through them and give you a chance to be very active today. But again, our definition at UW-Stevens Point is that active process. People become aware, make choices towards being more successful. It doesn't say we have to be the ultimate fittest person in the world or be the vegan sustainability guru. Those are all great things to do. So if you're that person, wonderful. But we don't have to be there to be considered well. And I think that's sometimes what we forget. So what does this mean when we think about what wellness is multidimensional and how we link this to self-care? Well, we think about wellness and we have these 7 dimensions: social, physical, emotional, career, intellectual, environmental, and spiritual. That incorporates all those. And I think for many of us during these last 2 years of the pandemic, we've probably seen a stronger emphasis in one area than another. It might have been social, it might have been emotional. The people that you work with, you might be seeing a stronger emphasis in one than the other. So trying to integrate all those, knowing that we're never fully in balance, that one may be a little more out of balance than the other, but how can we try to, again, reach that full potential? And they each overlap. So for social wellness, maybe you really like going to the fitness center and being in group fitness, and that was impacted your social and your physical wellness during the pandemic, and we had to find other ways to do it. Maybe your spiritual practices were interrupted, and you found that socially or emotionally that could cause issues. So again, you can see I could give you a lot of examples. I'm sure you could come up with those yourself. And to me, practicing self-care in these areas, knowing what we need and having a plan for what we need is a way to practice self-care. So you were sent this plan just earlier by email. It looks like this. Um, there's the 7 with all the dimensions of wellness. There's lines here. You can download that now. You can pull it up later. You can just get a piece of paper and write each dimension of wellness as we go through these and think about ways that you can make up a plan, and we'll touch base again at the end of this to see if you came up with any ideas of what you can do to maintain or improve your wellness in each of these 7 dimensions. So let's talk about the very first one. This is my favorite one, social wellness. I think I really like being social. I find that when people can really connect, that they are much happier. So what is social wellness? Well, it's about relating to and connecting with other people. And we're doing that today, even though we're all remote. So is it friendships, relationships, networking? I really like having a network, and regardless of what I'm involved in, whether it's a hobby, whether it's my career, I really like to connect. I'm a connector. I like to connect people and connect with people that have like interests and help each other out. So that's the basics of social wellness. So some steps: surrounding ourselves with good people. We know that there are people that we probably are better off not being around. Sometimes we do have to be around people that aren't as good for our social wellness, but how do we support ourselves and build that support group? Well, one of the ways is also getting involved in hobbies or other extracurricular activities. And many businesses that I work with, they're now calling these affinity groups. So like-minded people who share the same views, the same values, maybe the same hobbies, maybe they're at the same place in life right now, that there's a way that we can connect with like-minded people. We can also look at working on improved communication. And I'm sure if you're like me, I find many times during the day or the week that I could have done a better job with my spouse, that I could have done a better job through work of explaining my ideas better or waiting and listening a little bit more. So these are some basic steps. So let's just talk about these a little bit more in detail. So what's your support system? Who are these people that you can count on? Have you got a close circle of family and friends that you can turn to during challenging moments? Some of us aren't as good with turning to other people. But what I've found that at times when it's harder to ask for help, whether it's just mental support or even if it's a physical support, that there are always people there willing to help me out. And that is something that I've really learned, especially last year, as I gave you my example, what happened to me last fall, that I found myself saying yes to social support more and more. And people were so willing to do it, and it wasn't a burden on them. And so I've learned to say yes when people offer support. It's also a give and take. So if we take support from others, how can we give to others? We also want to look at people who have a positive mindset. There's a theory called the social contagion theory by a couple of authors and researchers called Christakis and Fowler. And they looked at the way that not just physical health behaviors, but mental and emotional health behaviors positively and negatively spread through groups of people. And they tracked how quickly negative behaviors can spread through groups of people. And I'm sure you've experienced this before. So think about this question, and again, you can unmute yourself or add it in the chat. What do you experience or feel when others around you are negative? How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel tired to be around all that negativity.
Yeah, that's a good one, Cami. I'm sure many of us feel like that. Amy's saying the same thing. It feels draining. If the work is even worth the time. Those are good points. Drag down, yeah. So you guys are describing this very similarly, that it's draining, it's fatiguing. How does that make you treat other people if you're around negativity too much? Does it make it easier for you to be positive to the next person, or maybe we spread through that social contagion a little bit of the negativity? I know when I come home from work, or if it's been a bad day or something's happened, that at times I can find myself not being quite as nice to my husband. And he doesn't need to have that. But again, sometimes it just bleeds through that whole social contagion. Yep, it makes it harder to be positive. So let's turn that around and say, if being dismissive of people who are negative, and we tend to not want to be around them anymore. So then let's think about how we build that positivity in to our daily life, because we know happiness spreads as much as negativity does. So how do we continue to spread that and then surround us with those people that can help us be positive? So now we know how we feel when we don't feel good. Let's think about ways to do that. So we talked about surrounding ourselves with those positive people. How about engaging in the hobbies and extracurriculars? I mentioned this was one of the ways to look at engaging in social wellness. It can help us find balance between work and life. And I don't really love the term work-life balance. I call it more work and life integration, because work is part of life. But if we have something positive to look forward to, a group of positive people that we associate with at work or even outside of work, it can help us maintain that social engagement, and it can also help us engage with positivity because we're engaging with like-minded people. So what are some places that help you, now that we've talked about what makes us feel negative? What are some of those hobby and extracurriculars that does help you with your social engagement and your positive interactions? For me, I have wanted to be a cowboy since I was 4 years old, and I'm going to be 60 this year, and I still want to be a cowboy, and I have 5 horses. And I engage with lots of horse people. I have tons of horse friends. So that's one of my things that really brings me back into the positive and charges me up, engaging with those like-minded people. Anybody want to share one and how that helps you with your social wellness? Oh, the movies in the library. I loved going to the library with my mother when we were kids. Loved the day it was library day. That is fun. Thank you for sharing that. No, yeah, weightlifting class, yes. So again, you get that social wellness, and moving into our next section as we talk about physical wellness. So again, there's different ways that we can do this. Communication is one that I mentioned earlier. Powell says, communication works for those who work at it. It's not something that comes automatically. So how can you look at being a better communicator, being clear in what you're saying, so you can be a better leader, spouse, employee, parent, friend? That active listening that we do, where we actually can reflect back what a person says to us, where we maintain eye contact, we don't turn away, we're not picking up our phones. So how can we continue to work on better communication is a really good way to help with our social well-being. So I want to send us into a little activity break just so we get to know each other a little bit better. And I'm not sure how many people we have on here. Colton was going to set this up. But if we have a medium-sized group, we could probably just do 3 breakout areas. But I want you to think about 3 things that others may not know about you, and I'm not sure how well everybody knows, but I want you to share in a group and then come back and think about what are 3 things you learned about another person that maybe you didn't know. So we'll take about 5 minutes to do this. So Colton, if you'll send everybody to a breakout room, that would be great. So anybody want to share something they learned from another person? Something interesting as you created your bigger social network? I had Julie from Wausau, and she's from Louisville, and she and I both talked about why we moved from southern states to Wisconsin, but we never want to live in the heat of the summer down south again. Hopefully you got to know something about a few of the people in your room. So that's just a little way when you have a networking session, you can always get to know people. So let's move on to the physical. Physical is usually pretty easy. We know this one really well. This is about physical activity, diet, nutrition, but it's also looking at not using tobacco, drugs, alcohol. The one thing I didn't put on here that's on another slide is really talking about taking care of our physical health. Are we getting regular physical exams? Are we getting dental exams? Are we getting the required preventive exams that we need based on our age, family history, those types of things? So what is physical wellness? We talk about physical activity, but it's not just exercise. Exercise is a type of physical activity, but it's not the only type of physical activity. Gardening, walking, there's a lot of different things that we can incorporate into our day. We always talk about consuming foods that enhance good health, and so to me, I don't like the word diet. I like the word of just trying to eat as healthy as possible, knowing that, at least for me, I'm not going to be perfect. Disease prevention. Again, I thought I was doing everything possible to prevent disease until last year, but now that I found out, since I've had cancer and had treatment, and now they've said it's gone, I'm like, okay, let's never have that again. So what am I doing now to try to prevent that? So there's a lot of different things that we can do with disease prevention, especially if we know we have a family history. We've already talked about self-care, sleep, and also getting those regular medical exams. How many of us are going to the doctor when we need to go? How about self-care of those around us? Because if we help the people around us get good self-care, then that also helps us. Also good hygiene, brushing teeth, are we having safe sex? So there's a lot of different things that we can think about in physical wellness beyond just exercise. So some of the importance of physical wellness, there's so much research out there about improving mood, sleep, strength, or heart disease, but also we can think about physical wellness as it relates to others. Social wellness. It helps me with my emotional wellness. Some people like to walk because it increases their spiritual connection to nature. But we also know that physical wellness is a way that we can encourage that positive lifestyle change, even if it's just one tiny little piece at a time. So I want you to think about this and put this in the chat. Just give you a minute or two to think about 2 strengths and weaknesses that you have in the physical dimension. And these are areas that you can start to put into that plan also as you think about what are strengths maybe that you'd like to maintain. You could add that to that wellness plan that you got. Or what is an area that you're not as strong in that you can maybe put some emphasis on. And again, please share any of these that you're comfortable sharing with in the chat, or even unmute yourself and tell us what that is. So brainstorm 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses. And I don't mind sharing one of my areas that I'm not as strong is turning down dessert. My father worked for Krispy Kreme until I was a mid-teenager, and I have an affinity for donuts. And so it's kind of hard to turn down a good donut. Drinking enough water, say no to carbs. Absolutely. We might find that many of you have some similar areas. Anybody else have some brainstorms you'd like to share? Better meal planning? Being interested in people waking up early? Okay. Anyone else have something that they'd like to share? Again, positive self-talk. Oh yeah, that gets into one of our pieces we'll talk about next, which is our emotional wellness for sure. But positive self-talk can help us with that physical dimension. I'm doing this because it makes me feel better. I'm going to go for a walk today because I know what it's going to benefit my heart, my weight, my physical activity that we may be doing for another reason. Absolutely. So these are areas, again, going back to that chart that I showed in the beginning that just had the little lines. You can use these to start building out your plan. So one of the easiest things to do is to add movement to your day. The recommendations are to get 30 minutes to 1 hour of physical activity on or most days of the week. And sometimes we think of that being hard. But years ago, I'd say more than 15 years ago, the Surgeon General at that time came out with the idea that we don't have to get 30 minutes all at one time if we can accumulate 10 minutes a day, 3 times a day. So how can we do that in our day? What are some ideas that you might have for putting in 3 10-minute sessions? In my building at work, I'm not at work today, I'm at home, but we can climb stairs. If I go around to all 4 corners and go up and down the stairs and go back to my office, I can get 10 minutes in. If it's nice outside, we can go out to walk. So there's a lot of different things that we can do to even just accumulate 30 minutes without thinking about committing that full one time if you don't have time in a day. So we're going to do a little activity challenge here that most of you are probably sitting. You can stay sitting, you can stay standing, but we're going to do our activity break. So this is really simple. So if you're sitting or if you're standing, whichever you're doing, just try to pull the belly button towards the spine, lift the crown of the head up to the ceiling, and then I just want you to inhale with shoulder shrugs. That's hard to say. As your inhale, as the shoulders come up, exhale as they go back and down. Let's just do that 5 times. Inhale up, exhale as they go back. Inhale up, exhale as they go back. Let's just do a couple more. I'm not going to count. And let's do one more. Really simple way, and we're just getting some activity in. The reason I'm only going to do backwards is because we're sitting at a desk, we're driving, we're on our phone. We spend our days this way, going forward. We want to spend our time now opening up and going backwards. And now we're going to do neck rotations. I just want you to simply look to the right side, over that shoulder, only as far as comfortable, keeping the shoulders back. Inhale back to center, and exhale and look over the other shoulder. Inhale back to center. Now inhale, exhale, drop the right ear to the right shoulder. And inhale, drop the left ear to the left shoulder. Inhale back up to center. Exhale, look down. Inhale, gently lift the chin and look up. We want to stay away from dropping the head too far back, but we want to stretch right here in the front of the neck because it stays collapsed a lot in our day. And now we're going to take another one. We're going to do some shoulder arm stretches. Take your right hand, if you can see this, I'm just placing it on my right shoulder, and I'm using my left hand and just pulling it back gently. We're stretching through our shoulder, we're stretching to the back of the arms. We're just going to keep breathing and hold this for a few seconds. We don't want to pull too far. We want to feel stretched but no pain. Then release it and switch to the other side. So again, really interactive things that you can do in these dimensions of wellness. And this is all ways to take care of yourself. Drop it down. We'll do a couple more. I'm not sure my computer will show this as well. But we're going to stand up, and nobody has to see this because you can either turn off your picture or we're just going to hula hoop. So if you remember when you're a kid, or maybe you're still doing it now, good for you. I don't think I could hula hoop, but we're going to do hip circles one way or the other. So do a few one way. When you've been seated too long, you always want to stand up and move. And after you've done those, you can just come up and down on your toes a few times. You can see me going up and down some. And then we can either stay standing, or we can be seated and extend one leg out in front if you're seated, and just slowly reach down with the opposite arm towards your knee, or if you can reach towards your toe. It doesn't matter how far you go. That stretches the back of our legs. And this is a really simple routine. You see how short a time it took us to do this. And then to reach the other side, because I want to be able to give you guys simple strategies for self-care that you can really easily incorporate into your day. And then come back up. How do you guys feel now? Anybody feel better after those stretches? Cami says she feels great. Thank you, Cami. More awake? Absolutely, because we're getting more oxygen in. More awake. I'm getting a thumbs up from Miranda. Thank you guys for letting me know. Probably need to do this a little bit later because I don't like sitting around and listening for an hour and a half. So I wanted to get you, yeah, you can't sit at your desk for 5 hours at a time. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. So, I mean, that's really, really simple thing that we can do without even having to leave our office. You know, we just stood up and sat back down. Thank you guys. So let's move on to the emotional dimension. So emotional wellness now is looking at awareness, acceptance, expressions of your feelings, happiness, joy, love, sadness, anger, fear, or stress. So can we control our emotions? Sometimes we don't need to control our emotions necessarily and get away from them. And I'm not a psychologist, but what I have found in my experience is that people often think they classify their emotions as good or bad. And I try not to classify my emotions. Like if I'm stressed, that's not bad. That just means I need to be aware of something else I might need to do. If I'm angry or afraid, what else could I do a strategy to put in place to help move through it? So here's some examples. Coping with stressors. You can see this. This is an older picture of myself with shorter hair. You can't see the sign, but we did a gratitude thing and said, what do you do? What's emotional wellness? And one of my things is I do a gratitude list every single day. I start my day with it. A lot of people like to end their day, but I write 3 gratitudes, and I've probably been doing it for 20 plus years. So that way I think every morning of something I'm grateful for, something that could have happened the previous day, something that's coming up that day. So I've got 20 years of journals stacked up in a bin. I now started doing it on a Google Doc, so I have it on my phone every day, but I do a gratitude. So that's the way I look at my emotional well-being, is having an attitude of gratitude. Well, we know that sometimes we put our emotions on a back burner, and you're in a job that you are giving to other people so much, the type of job that you're in, is that sometimes we find that we have put our emotions on the back burner. That 26% of Americans suffer from some type of mental disorder, that we have some type of stress overload, social isolation when our emotions aren't being handled as appropriately as they could, and we might find it a lack of motivation. So I'm not going to ask anybody to share, but does anybody recognize this? And I think during the pandemic, this got a lot worse, is that we felt stressed, we felt more socially isolated, that at times it was maybe harder to get motivated, that mental health has really come to the forefront. And I'm sure the people that you deal with after school, in the after school network, the kids and everything are really having a hard time with this also. So that's when self-care and taking care of our emotions is really important when we're helping others. So just recognize if you're starting to feel this way, what that might be. So what's included in emotional wellness? I really like this quote. Life is 10% of what happens to you, 90% how you react to it. I had a discussion with a friend about that last night. So how do we accept our feelings and emotions, even if we don't feel like they're the ones we want to have all the time? What about self-esteem? I'm a believer that we build self-esteem by doing things that are esteemable, or things that are positive, that build our self-esteem, helping others, doing things that are positive. I know many of you said you like spreading positivity, so to me that's what builds self-esteem. Do we have good intimacy, but also independence? So are we interdependent, where we help each other? Also, stress is one of the biggest ones. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But how do we express emotions in a positive manner? And it was really interesting last week to listen to the presentation and the presenter was talking about how to help those that you work with express emotions more positively. So if we learn how to do it, it's easier to help others do it. So I think that's going to be really important, is that we can tell them what we have done. I found that it's hard to give somebody advice if I haven't done it myself. If I say, this is what I have done, it worked for me, then it's easier to sometimes help other people express those emotions. And I also like to take risks. Anybody here a risk taker? That's how I work through my fear often, is I still do it scared. I've traveled abroad alone several times, took students, 13 college students twice to the UK and to Ireland. That was an interesting challenge, but I did it anyway. That we take risks, that again will help build self-esteem and our positive emotional wellness. We add to our bucket instead of taking away from it. Some ways to maintain your emotional wellness is just staying connected. Again, that's part of that social wellness. I hope you're seeing the overlap there. The positivity, practice being mindful, and again, asking for help. So again, like we did last time, I want you to brainstorm 2 strengths and weaknesses you have in emotional wellness, and please post those in the chat. And if there's one you particularly want to emphasize, either a strength or a weakness that you're going to put into your plan, let us know that also. Or please unmute yourself. I like hearing voices besides mine too. Anyone have something? Okay, good. I think it was Miranda that disappeared already, said knowing a lot of things you could do for your emotional wellness. That is wonderful awareness. Emotional self-care, being non-judgmental. Yeah, that was something I heard last week too. If you're doing that with other people, that was really important for the group that you work with in the after school network. Doing that for ourselves. Sometimes we are really tough on ourselves. I agree. Okay, well, those are things that you can then put into your wellness plan of ways that you can either maintain or start to initiate ways to build your own self-care plan in the 7 dimensions. So these are just some, okay, thank you, Miranda. Added something in the chat. So these are some ways that you can incorporate emotional wellness, support, time management, journaling, personal time, social connections. I think you're probably seeing there's, again, that overlap I talked about, getting enough sleep, social connections, getting into a routine, whatever that looks like. So I want to go into a breakout again. I don't know how many people, we only had 3 people in the breakout last time, so maybe we have fewer groups. But I want to have you go into the breakout and come back and say, what does emotional wellness mean to you? And then come back with one idea from the whole group that everybody from the group can report, that one person from the group can be your reporter. What was one thing that the whole group decided that resonated with everybody? So we'll take 5 minutes and go into breakout and have everybody discuss what is emotional wellness and then come back with one idea. So we're going to move into career, which is what you're doing today. But our career wellness is actually looking at personal satisfaction and enrichment in life through what we do. Many of us here are doing this because we love to do it, right? But it can also include professional development, continuing ed. Again, I don't love the term work-life balance. I think we just should call it life integration and opportunities for advancement. But I also want to share a picture of you. This is one of our instructors in our nutrition program, senior lecturer Deborah Tang. And she builds in career wellness, and again, we overlap with her physical wellness by having a standing desk. I don't know how many of you have standing desks, but I'd like to bring mine home because I'm working from home a lot. But ways to, say I'm going to be here, but let's look at doing our physical wellness in with our career wellness. Jen gave me a thumbs up. I don't know if that meant you have a standing desk or you like the idea, but I really like standing desks. But that's an example of what we have at UW-Stevens Point. What I find is that, do we have personal satisfaction in what we're doing every day? Now, that doesn't mean every day is roses, but do we feel like having that personal fulfillment helps us balance that when we do give a little bit too much at the work, in our work life, maybe we can balance that out with personal fulfillment in our home life? How is your attitude about work? Is it good? Is it bad? How about desire to have a career that contributes to a positive impact? What everybody's doing has a very positive impact in this group. But we often think about other careers when I talk to other groups, is that how does somebody who answers the phone at the credit card company, how does that help them think about having a purpose? They can have a purpose, but sometimes it's harder for some people to think about that. And how do you help other people? To me, that's what's more rewarding in my career, when I see students be successful. So those are some areas in career wellness. But I want to talk really more about 6 areas in work-life integration. And as you're doing this, make notes either on that form or on a piece of paper in front of you, and see if you can add a strategy in an area that may seem unbalanced. And as we get to it, please share that in the chat or share it in with a larger group. So with self-management, exercise, sleep, nutrition, that does help us with our career wellness. There's a term in worksite wellness that I do, it's called presenteeism. And it's really, how present are you when you're at work? And there's been a lot of studies that show when people are mentally, emotionally, physically having issues, that they're not as engaged at work, and so their presenteeism is not as strong. So we actually talk about presenteeism all the time as being an outcome of worksite wellness. So we know that this has a lot to do with career wellness. So where are we in self-management and being where we can build presenteeism stronger, so when we're at work, we're more present when we're there? So what would be a step that you would take in self-management to improve your own presenteeism, where you're really here? Hopefully you're all still here on the call. Some stuff into our chat, or you can make a note. How do you do self-management? Let's move on to time management. That was one of my areas. Oh, have several calendars. Yep, that'll help you with time management also. Post-its. Kind of like that picture before right here, managing yourself. Yeah, I've got a thing full of Post-it notes right here. I have several paths of them. So time management. How do you make optimal use of your day? How do you keep pace? Then we also need to know, what are our resources? My own physical abilities that day, my own mental capacities that day. Can I adapt my challenges of the day to how I'm feeling with my own resources? That if it's a day where something's going to be really challenging and your resources, personal resources aren't there, can we change that challenge to another day? We may not be able to, but knowing that, I think Jen said it in our group earlier about checking in with ourselves, where we are limited in some of our resources, can help us with that also. Having goals, at least, having one thing, even if it's very simple, that you want to accomplish by the end of the day. Not everything on the checklist, not all the big goals necessarily, but is there a goal every day? And then I go through my own mental priority list, what's most important, what's urgent. And then what kind of organizational tools. So what do you do, what resources do you do to manage? Some people have already said a calendar, Post-its. Anybody else have a different resource they'd like to share? Because this will help us all if there's something that we'd like to learn from. We can learn from each other. Anybody else have a strategy you'd like to share? Those of you who use Post-it notes, how do you use your Post-it notes? Do you make notes on them? Do you put them in particular areas? Do you put them in your calendar? Because I would certainly like better strategies myself.
I like to use a dry erase board and do weekly goals and then daily goals. That way I can just erase them when I'm done, and it's super helpful to see my list getting smaller.
Oh, I really like that. Thanks for sharing that, Cami. Does anybody else use that one? That is a great tool. Yep.
I sometimes I'll set a timer. So if I have certain, smaller tasks or maybe one big task and it's just overwhelming, I will set, maybe half an hour or an hour or whatever, and just focus on it. And then when the timer's up, I can get up, take a break, walk around instead of getting distracted by being at home and, oh, I should go through the laundry and I should go do that. So to kind of help keep me focused and like manage my time so that I'm completing those Post-it notes and that stuff.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I just saw somebody post, and mine pops up and kind of goes away, that posted, if somebody can read it, where they said they take Post-it notes in meetings and then use Fridays to organize them. Who was that posted that one? That was a great idea too. I think that goes along with what Kelly was saying.
Monty posted that.
Okay. Yeah, so those are some really good ways to look at time management. And that can also help you with career wellness. Stress management. I don't really like this term, but it's the one we always use. Because I think stress is inevitable. It says stress is inevitable. But how do we work on working around alleviating the consequences of having too much stress, of poor stress, actually? And so there's a lot of resources, finding what works for you. Is it checking in? Is that mindfulness? Is it a lot of different things that you can do? So it's really a way to look at how do you improve everyday functioning? And what works for one person is not going to work for another. What are those stressors? I know that I tend to get more stressed when I don't get enough sleep. So that goes back to my physical wellness, which then plays to my emotional and career wellness. So again, what makes you feel stressed, and what are some techniques that work for you? So again, you can make notes if this is one of those areas that you'd like to work on your plan, or if you've got something you'd like to share that would help the group, that would be great. Because again, we're all learning from each other. That's part of self-care. We learn from each other. Jen?
I recently heard something. I thought, I haven't implemented this for myself yet, but I thought it was a really good idea. That at the end of the day, oftentimes we can feel either exhausted from the day, or we get caught up in all the things that we didn't get done, or the things that we think didn't go as well as we had hoped they had gone. And so the person, and I don't even remember who I heard this from, but at the end of the day, they reflect on 3 good things that happened during their workday. So what things did I accomplish? What things went well or better than expected? And then close the book on that day with those thoughts, and then try and let that go, and then then transition out of your workday into your home life, so you kind of aren't carrying all that workday stress with you. I thought that was kind of a nice way to end your workday.
That is a great strategy. And if that resonates with anybody, add that to that plan that I sent you, or your own version of a plan, that if this is something you think you can do, because it sounds like it could be very simply incorporated at the end of the day. I mean, we've got if you do Outlook, we have our Outlook calendars now. We could schedule in 10 minutes before the workday is to end to reflection time. So it could be something just as simple as putting it in our calendar to have that time to reflect and step back and check in. Thank you for sharing that. That's a good one. Okay, so change management. There are a lot of people who don't like to change because it's scary. There are some people who really like change. And I think most of us maybe are a little bit in between, but change happens all the time. And so how do we adapt to that so that we can continue to be successful? How can we accept the fact that change is going to happen? And it took me a while to learn years ago that acceptance didn't mean that I had to agree with it or like it. It just meant that I had to understand that that's the way it was and move on from there and decide what my next steps were. So again, how do we do that? How do we adopt new methods And that's one thing I'm hoping that you'll leave from this today, is that you've got some type of plan of some areas and some strategies that you've learned either from each other, I hope from each other, maybe some that I've given you, things that you can simply do to make some simple changes. So the volume of the rate of change should not overwhelm you. Sometimes it does seem like it is, but we go back to our time management and how do we do that? So again, how do you deal with change and how do you help adapt to that? And if anybody has any strategies, feel free to share those in the chat. I'll move on to my last couple of them. Technology management. How many of you have your smartphone sitting right there? How many of you are on a call? You may be doing this now, and I have to admit I've done it in many meetings before where I'm doing anything else but being in the meeting that I'm supposed to be in. So again, there's a lot of things that we can do. I'm supposed to be in a meeting this afternoon and I've got to finish some grading. I'm like, okay, can I combine both of them? But then I'm not really present. I'm using my technology, but how can we help our technology service? And then I saw somebody post earlier about a pros and cons list. I like that too. But how can we use technology to help us with our career wellness, but not get too much into our emotional well-being to look to where it ties us down in our physical well-being? How can we use it in all areas to help us with our wellness and our self-care? And the most overlooked, our leisure management. I already talked about this in social wellness, but how can we look at our career wellness? Why would you think leisure management is really important in career well-being? Anybody? We have to have that time off, right? We have to have that downtime away from work where we're not thinking of work and the people that we serve and what needs to be done. If we don't take that time to recharge, then we're not as successful in our career. So again, this is about rest and relaxation. And we've already talked about what type of leisure activities. Do you change your leisure activities a lot? Do you learn new things, new hobbies that you want to pick up? Those are ways that you can do that. So as we're moving towards the last of the dimensions, we've got 3 left. Intellectual wellness. Hopefully what you're doing today is helping you a little with intellectual wellness, though I know many of you have expertise in many of these areas, or maybe all of these areas. So I can't talk now. Intellectual wellness is creative, stimulating mental activities. And I just wanted to show you a picture of employee wellness, what we did in facility services. These are our auto mechanics, custodial, the people who do painting, electrical, a lot of the times the people who keep the place running, but we don't often see them and see that how much they're important. And they really like when in employee wellness that our students plan activities for them, and they wanted to learn more about nutrition. And so we did an activity where we put nutrition questions and answers in a balloon. And they had to go stomp on each other's balloon. They tied them around their ankle, and they had to go match up the correct answer to the correct question. And then we fed them a healthy food after that and gave them recipes. And they had a ball learning about this because, again, it was something that got them socially engaged. It was career wellness, but it was also intellectual because it was something they wanted to learn more about in a particular area. So what can we do in the people we work with to help stimulate their intellectual well-being? So we often think of being creative as painting and singing and dancing, which is great. I'd love to be able to paint, sing, or dance or play an instrument. I'm not that good at them, but we can have creative abilities in other ways. So how do you expose yourself also to new skills, ideas, beliefs, staying open-minded? Seeing both sides of the story, development of study skills if you're studying a new activity you're trying to do, and becoming a critical thinker. So tell me before we move on to the next one, how do you feel like you're creative? I think of being creative as finding a new solution to a challenge or a problem. It could be in an art type way. How are you creative? So you can put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Anyone? Well, think about that, and you can add that in also. Challenge myself and others to see both sides of everybody's story, absolutely, because we don't always know everybody's story. All right, we're going to do an activity here, and I don't have a prize for you. I'll give you all 1,000,000 bonus points for the person that gets this right. And if you've done this before, then you can just encourage people. But this is an activity that you need to figure out. Pinterest. Oh yeah, I like Pinterest. So what objects can you bring through this door? And you can keep guessing either out loud or put in the chat until we run out of answers. We'll do this for about 1 minute, about one minute. And if you're wrong, then you've got to stand up and do 5 jumping jacks or 5 standing push-ups or chair squats. I won't know if you do it, but but do something for getting yourself up and moving. So for example, what you can't bring through these green doors, you can not bring a cat, but you can bring a kitten. You can bring a tree, but you can't bring a leaf. You can't bring dirt, but you can bring in grass. So start making some guesses about what you can bring through this door. What can you bring through the door? And don't be afraid to make a guess, because you might be right, and if you're not right, who cares? It's just fun. Can I bring a puppy? Yes, you can bring a puppy. Oh, Kelly, yes, you can bring a book. No, you cannot bring a fork or a friend. Hopefully those of you with those guesses did your 5 exercises. Anybody? You've got 30 seconds. Keep guessing. Those are good guesses. Oh, yes, you can bring in a seed. Yes, you can bring in a sheep and an egg, but you cannot bring a flower. No snack. Oh, Shane's got it. All right, you got about 10 seconds. Cannot bring a child. Great guesses, you guys. I love it. Not a canvas. Not paint. All right, time's up. Shane, you said you got it. Tell us what the answer was. You can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and tell us. How did you get the answer? Any word with 2 letters next to each other that are the same. Absolutely, good job. Give him a hand, or her. I can't see your picture, so I'm not really sure. But give the person a hand. Good job. Absolutely. Yes, so anything that has 2 letters next to each other. You guys did a good job. Some of you may have played this before, but hopefully that stimulated some of your intellectual wellness and got you stimulated to start thinking today. So some ways to do it, and you guys have mentioned this. Read for fun. Read something that you don't even have to read for work. Something you want to learn about. How about learning a foreign language or playing a game, puzzles? Oh, you can bring a puzzle through the door and you can play puzzles to increase intellectual wellness. Play a musical instrument. I played piano as a child and I took lessons again as an adult and I enjoyed it. I just didn't keep up with it, but it was fun to do. And then journal. Write down your thoughts, Do something that will really stimulate your brain. Those are really good ways to do it. We're going to do one more brain teaser here because I like this one. And we'll see what you guys get. So there's a series of kind of riddles, another way to stimulate your mental and your intellectual well-being. So you're going to be given a time to read it and answer it, and after that minute you can either volunteer to answer out loud or you can write it in the chat. Are you guys ready? This is our next activity for intellectual wellness. Kevin's mother, so just do the first one. Kevin's mother has 3 children. The first is called Alpha, the second is called Beta. What was the name of the third? Who has the answer to the first one? Kevin! Very good. Kevin, you guys got it. You have good intellectual wellness. Next question. You eat something you can neither plant nor plow. It is the son of water, but if it touches water, it dies. What is it? It's not fire. Christine, I don't care if it didn't make sense to you. It's a great guess. You got active. Good for you. Anybody? It's a tough one, isn't it? It's salt. Salt. I didn't know this one either until I got this one because I looked it up. I did not make up these riddles. All right. Question 3. A bear walks south for a kilometer, then it walks west for a kilometer, then it walks north for a kilometer, and ends up at the same point from which it started. What color was the bear? Harder one, isn't it? Ooh, Kelly says it's white. White. All right, Kelly, tell me why you said white. You're the first one that answered.
Because it's a polar bear?
Yes! Good job, 'cause this is the only place where you could walk in these directions and at the same places at the North Pole. Good job, you guys. All right, last question. I forgot to put question 4 in front of it, but it is number 4. Before Mount Everest was discovered, what was the highest mountain on Earth? Shane says Mount Everest. Monty says Mount Everest. How many of you agree with that? Agree. Mount Everest, it was unnamed. It is Mount Everest. Just because it hadn't been discovered, it was still the highest mountain on Earth. I did read what the highest mountain on Earth that had been discovered prior to Mount Everest, but I forgot the name of it. So I did read about it, but it is Mount Everest. Good job, you guys. You guys got all 4 of them except the salt. That was a hard one. Give yourselves a hand. Yay. So as you're working on your very last piece for intellectual wellness, what is one challenge you could face yourself with to improve? Oh, that could have written that better. A challenge that you can use to improve your intellectual wellness. What is one thing? And then one thing you took away from this dimension. How could you use it? Use brain teasers. Yep. So again, you can write this in your wellness plan for your self-care. Read more, absolutely. So always think about those creative, stimulating mental activities. And again, if you can overlap wellness dimensions, I'm gardening. I started doing a lot more gardening during the pandemic. And there's some new vegetables that I don't know how to plant as well. So I'm getting physical activity and intellectual activity by learning about how to plant some of this stuff and grow it better. So again, can we combine? Absolutely. Thank you, guys. That was a really engaging one. You like the riddles. Incorporate new recipes into my meal planning. Jen, can I come to your house? Because I don't like to cook, but I like to eat. Yeah, my husband likes to cook, so he's always using new recipes. So I think that's a way he gets really stimulated. He's retired, and so he uses his skills to cook. Makes me happy too. Great, you guys. Thank you for sharing. Environmental wellness. We hear a lot about this with climate change. I just finished listening to a book on tape about the start of the Earth, and our whole Earth was all about climate change. It's something that's always happened. So how do we manage what's going on to help us be more sustainable is the way that I look at climate change now, not as the catastrophizing, is that the right word, what is happening, because it's always happened. But how do we manage that so that our existence is more sustainable is, I think, a really important part. So how do we care and protect resources? Knowing where your food's coming from, sustainability, recycling, awareness of footprint, there's a lot of other things. Down here at UW-Stevens Point, we have all these different bins on every floor of almost every single building and in the residence halls, where all you have to do is walk out and recycle your waste, paper, glass. In some areas we even had, near eating areas, we even had, compost bins where people could put in their things that composted. And they do compost at some of our dining centers. So we really want to look at maintaining living conditions, having that harmonious relationship. To me, environmental sustainability is also human sustainability. How do we sustain the humans that we're around? Which is why I like the second point about having that harmonious relationship. Also, how do we have a more sustainable lifestyle? Where we can look at, can we reduce packaging? How can we protect natural resources as much? Eliminating pollutants or reducing pollutants and waste. So there's a lot of things that we can think about with environmental wellness. So we're going to do this activity break. Consider your homework environment in this category of, it could be, because we don't drive as much. So we're reducing the amount of gas that we're using. We're not contributing to carbon pollution. It absolutely could. And right now with gas prices, we could definitely think about it's environmentally friendly and budget friendly, right? So let's think about this. So I want you guys to write this down, and we're going to come up with some guesses on each one of these. And I got this information from a website that we've used, and hopefully it's as correct as possible. We've used it for quite a while. But how many years to decompose for a plastic bottle, plastic bag, cotton, glass bottles, hairspray bottle, aluminum can, styrofoam cup, newspaper, and paper towel? So again, you can put this in the chat if you have a guess on one of these. Plastic is like 400 to 450 years. Okay. Is that for the bottle and the bag? Same guess, probably. Yeah, not sure about the bag. When we get to the next slide, we'll see what the differences are. How about cotton, anyone? How long do you think cotton takes? Cotton ball, cotton clothing, newspapers for a year. Okay. Other guesses? Cotton, 4 years. I was going to put you guys in the breakout rooms and give you $1 million bonus points, but I think we got a small enough group. We can do it this way. Cotton, okay, 4 years. Anybody got paper towel, aluminum, styrofoam, glass bottles? Keep guessing. Still got a few left to cover. Good guesses. $100 for a glass bottle. Could be the styro, never. Could be the benefit of being on the internet. You can all look it up really quick. All right, well, we'll move to the next one just so you see. Plastic bottle is about 70 to 450 years. And I don't know the difference. There are different thicknesses of bottles, things like that. Plastic bag, 500 to 1,000 years. Cotton, 1 to 5 years. So I think those of you who said 4 years were pretty much right in the middle. Hairspray bottle, 200 to 500 years. Glass bottle, 1 to 2 million years. Aluminum can, 200 years, styrofoam, 500, newspaper, about 6 weeks, and paper towel, 2 to 4 weeks. So again, some pieces disintegrate quicker than others. I've put these websites here if you want to look them up really quick where we got some of these answers. But again, we have to think about what I'm using and how long it takes to decompose. I use a lot of cardboard and newspaper and paper and stuff in my garden now to reduce weeds, and then the next year, like this year, I tilled it all under again because it was all decomposing, and so it helps add to my soil. How many of you do some of these? Give yourself a point. How many of you snip your 6-pack rings? How many of you use recycled paper bags when shopping, or even cloth bags? Don't leave your water running when you're brushing your teeth, or when you're washing dishes. You might wash and then rinse. Ride your bike, walk, take public transportation instead of driving. Or you work from home. We recycle and compost, use natural cleaning products, or stop your junk mail. Oops. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. How many of you got all 7 of them? How many of you got 6? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Got 6, 5, 4. Okay. So again, these are some things that we could, 5 of 7. There's some things that we could think about putting on our self-care plan of ways that we can improve our environmental well-being. That could be just as simple as snipping the 6-pack rings. How does one stop the junk mail? There's, I've seen it where, a lot of it's contacting each individual company, but there may be a way to find that. You could use your intellectual wellness to find that online and then let us know. That would be great. I should know that if I'm going to talk about it though, shouldn't I? I'm going to write that down. Junk mail. Thank you. All right. So as we're moving on these, I think we know the benefits of environmental wellness. We hear a lot about this on the news and the types of work that we do. So again, we often have to think about beyond just what we do in this country, but in other countries, there's still a lot of problems with pollution, waste that can cause other types of illnesses. And so what can we do to help those also? So is there a takeaway that you had about environmental wellness, or something that you wanted to write on your list to wrap up this second to last dimension of wellness? Anything? All right, so our last one is spiritual. Junk mail for sure, yes, and I wrote that down. I'm going to look that up. Spiritual wellness is sometimes hard to talk about for people because depending on how they feel about spirituality, they often relate it to religion. And it could be, definitely could be part of a religious practice for you, but for other people it may not be. But we call it the ability to search for meaning and purpose in human existence. So values and morals, appreciation of the surrounding, having purpose. Again, that could be part of your career wellness too. So again, pointing out some of these overlaps. So again, how can you develop some spiritual wellness? I think for you guys, you do this in your jobs too. So the second to last bullet about acting in welfare for others, able to practice forgiveness and compassion. And I heard the presenter last week talking about this, about how to work with the children in some of these after-school networks at the camps where he's worked before, of how you act with forgiveness and compassion, but still help them do better. And I really appreciated his take on that. So again, this is what spiritual wellness, some things that we can think about. So to improve spiritual wellness, and I apologize, this slide got really messed up. It's the first one that seems to have been kind of screwy looking. But again, how do you look at improving this? So you can express what it is through journaling, look for meaning in life, think about what is our purpose in life. Yoga for some people is a physical technique that really helps with wellness. I saw somebody talk about practicing kindness. There's the Random Act of Kindness Day that comes up in every year too. There's a website for that. Being positive, taking time to meditate. So there's a lot of different things you can do to improve spiritual wellness. And I just want you to take a moment here before we move on to the wrap-up of our discussion question here. What gives your life meaning and purpose? What would you like to accomplish, and what are your values? Now, we won't have time to do all of these, but reflect on one that you feel like is really resonating with you. What gives your life meaning, or what would you like to accomplish, or what would you like to demonstrate in your actions and thoughts that's the way you show your values? And again, this could be a way, if there's a better way for you to do it, it could go on your self-care plan. Does anybody have something they'd like to share here? Again, chat or unmute. Paying it forward. Oh, yes. I like that. Sometimes we think of pulling up in the fast food line and somebody in front of us paid for our meal. And that's a really great way of doing it, but there's so many ways we can continue to pay it forward. So I want you to continue to self-reflect on that one. Positive voice in the world. I liked how this group seems to really want to be positive, because you really are doing work that is very positive. And then as you get to spiritual wellness, do you take time to be alone? Do you pray or reach out to whatever you consider a higher power? Do you think about what the meaning of life is for you? Take walks in nature. Life isn't all about us. Put down the phone to just be. You'll see so much overlap in spiritual wellness and some of the other areas that we've already talked about. So again, if we work in one, I think it brings the rest of them into balance. Helps. And then you can do mindfulness meditation. There's so many that we could do. We don't have time to do it today, but there's some really good mindfulness meditations. This one's only 5 minutes, this video that you could sit and do, and it doesn't take a lot of time to sit and be quiet. So as you put it all together, if you haven't noticed that the 7 dimensions of wellness spell the term species, that we're all there and as part of the human species and the world species. So again, you can take each one of those 7 areas of wellness and make your plan. This is just an example of what you could put in each one of them. Develop a purpose, move more. We just did, like less than 5 minutes. Gratitude, stress, balance, ergonomics for career, learn a skill, read. You guys have all been putting wonderful stuff in the chat. But then if you put it on paper sometimes with your plan, to me that makes it a little more concrete. And I'm more likely to do it than just sometimes thinking about it in my head. And then what do you want in your routine? So sticking to that healthy routine and tracking your progress. How are you tracking your progress? I can track every day that I've done my gratitude list because I label them every single day. And I put a different cute little sticker on my Google Doc now for each month and each day and things like that. So can we track those things? We absolutely can. Our smartwatches can track our sleep, our activity. Somebody was talking about some apps that they use. I use Calm. There's a lot of different things we can do. And that there's an assessment if you ever want to assess your personal wellness. AbbottSolutions.com. She's a retired professor from UW-Stevens Point, and she created, based on the 7 dimensions, an assessment of where you are. So you could just go to AbbottSolutions.com and do that self-assessment of where you are in the different areas of the 7 dimensions of wellness. And that can also help you with your plan. So hopefully you guys got a little active, you got a little engaged. I know it was a lot of information. I don't think it's any of the major brainstorm that we probably didn't know. It's just quantifying it into a dimension and helping you see a way to put that into a plan for yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Scoville. I oftentimes have a hard time sitting and doing exactly what we just did and being able to, kind of evaluate. So thank you for allowing us to have that hour and a half to be able to do this for ourselves. So thank you so, so much. We appreciate you being here. So if you have any further questions regarding today's webinar, please email the Wisconsin After School Network at the email address provided in the chat box. For more information about a series of professional development opportunities in addition to this learning series, it can be found on the Wisconsin After School Network's website. The web address will be posted in the chat box as well. And for our next and final webinar, which will be on May 27th with Jennifer Smith, who is, there she is, yep. She's a program coordinator with the Marshfield Clinic. Jen's presentation will focus on creating trauma-informed care environments in the out-of-school time. And this 90-minute session begins at 11 a.m. We encourage you to participate in this series as we all continue to work to provide quality out-of-school time opportunities for kids and families. Thank you for your participation on today's webinar and for the work that you do on behalf of the children and families in the state of Wisconsin. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Dr. Scoville, and have a lovely weekend.